Hey everyone, Jeff here from the Your Move team. Last year, we raised and gave away over $5 million to local and global nonprofits. This year, we're going to do it again. As we launch the Be Rich series, we want to give the Your Move community a chance to get involved by visiting BeRichTogether.com. During this campaign, we will partner with nonprofits that are absolute rock stars in their communities. We will raise money for them and then give them 100% of it. The money raised helps these nonprofits go further faster with the people they're already serving in their communities. Get involved today by visiting BeRichTogether.com and join with us to be rich in good deeds. We really do believe that the next 30 minutes will help you make better decisions and live with fewer regrets. So today, we're going to continue with Andy's second message in his 4-part series, Be Rich. Now, most of us don't feel rich, but if you make over 48 grand a year, you're in the top 1% of wage earners in the world. In this message, Andy asks you to rethink how rich you really are.
If you're here for the first time or haven't been here for a long time, we are on the front end of this series, How to Be Rich. And the reason we do this just about every year, is because we all hope to be rich someday, and we hope to be good at it, because most rich people aren't very good at being rich. And there's a passage of scripture where Paul, who wrote the majority of the letters that got included in the New Testament, was talking to his protege, Timothy, and he says to Timothy, look, when you talk to rich people, there's some things you need to tell rich people, because rich people have their own issues. And so he tells them basically how to be good rich people. So what we do every year is we practice being rich so that if we're ever rich, we'll be good at it. Now, if you listen to this message and think, I need to hear that again, or I'd like for somebody to hear it again, if you'll go to this website right here, howtoberich.org, you can watch all of these messages in the entire series as many times as you want for free. And if you're in a small group, you can download questions and talk about these. Or if you're a Sunday school teacher, maybe in your church, and you're wondering who's going to teach the lesson next week, you just bring in your laptop, pop it open, and there'll be questions, and I'll teach Sunday school for you. So we really would love for as many people as possible to interact with this content, and especially to ask the questions. Now, again, most American rich people aren't very good at being rich, and so we want to prepare you in case that ever happens. And the reason we know that most rich Americans specifically aren't very good is that in the United States, the more Americans make, the less money they give away. Now, this is really strange. In terms of actual dollars, it's more, but in terms of percentage, and as we're going to see, Jesus was all about the percentage, Americans actually give a lower percentage away the more money they make. Now, there's a reason for that, and we're going to explore that today. And again, this is just a heads up for those of you who may someday be rich, and I just want you to know, as your pastor, I'm praying that all of you become massively wealthy, but I want you to be good at it. So that's why we're practicing. Now, here's why I think Paul said some specific things to rich people, and specifically to rich Christians. And if you're a Christian or a Christ follower, then you really need to pay close attention. Here's the good news. If you're not a Christian, or if you're not a church person, you can just pick and choose which of this stuff you like and dislike, because you're not accountable for any of it, but you might find it fascinating. Now, here's what we're going to talk about today. Wealth has side effects. Now, you know this because you've met some very strange rich people, haven't you? They're just odd. It's like, wow. And you wonder, were they odd and they got rich, or were they normal and then they got rich and they got odd? But you need to understand, because I don't want you to get odd, that wealth has side effects. For example, one of the side effects of wealth is that rich people live in denial. Now, this is so strange, isn't it? Because tall people admit they're tall. Short people admit they're short. Athletic people admit they're athletic. Artsy people, they don't mind telling you they're artsy. Their room's a mess, their car's a mess, their life's a mess, and they're just happy as they can possibly be, and they love that, you know. Introverts, they don't mind telling you they're introverts. Extroverts, they can't wait to tell you, that they're extroverts, like they really need to tell you, So, but when it comes to rich people, they won't admit that they're rich. They live in denial, and this is a big deal. Gallup did a survey not too long ago asking what is rich, and it came back, the average American thought if you made $150,000 a year, then you were rich. But if you were to ask people who make $150,000 a year, are you rich? They say, oh no, I'm not rich. Then they surveyed people who made around $30,000 to $35,000 a year, and they said, what's rich? And they said $75,000 a year. If you had that much money, you'd be rich. But if you ask somebody who makes $75,000 a year, are they rich? They'd say, oh, I'm not rich. Then a few years ago, Money Magazine did a survey for all their subscribers and asked the question, how much money would you need to have in basically liquid or almost liquid assets to feel like you were rich? $5 million, okay? Which means The readers of Money Magazine, if they had $1 million in liquid assets, they wouldn't think they're rich. $2 million, not rich. $3 million, not rich. $4 million, not rich. $4.5 million in liquid assets, or you're rich. I'm not rich. You'd need $5 million in liquid assets, and I don't know this for a fact, but I pretty much guarantee you, if you were to ask somebody with $5 million of liquid assets, are you rich? They'd say, I'm not rich. Now, why is that? It's because rich people, they live in denial. Now, the other side effect of being rich, and this is going to come as a shock, rich people are plagued by discontentment. Now, you will not believe what I'm about to say, so but you just listen and check it out on your own. You see, stuff, the accumulation of stuff is like an appetite, and appetites are never fully nor finally satisfied. In fact, when you feed an appetite, what happens to it? It grows. That's right. If you feed an appetite, it grows. If you starve an appetite, it shrinks. Opposite of growth, shrink. Right. I thought you guys were brighter than that. Okay. I think all the online people knew the answer to that. Okay. Now, here's why this is important. Here's what rich people do. I'm just warning you in case you ever become one. Rich people get more stuff. So what happens to their appetite for stuff? Does it grow or shrink? Grows and they want more stuff, okay? And it gets bigger and bigger because, bottom line, this is true. This might even be true for you, even though you're not rich yet. The more a person has, the more he or she wants. So rich people do this strange thing. You might have heard this word. It's called upgrade. Have you heard of upgrade? Upgrade's when you have something that works perfectly, and you go basically get another one just like it that's a little newer. And then you have two. This is what rich people do because they have so much extra money. They do this. For example, they'll like drive their car that works onto a dealership car lot and they leave it there. And then they take some money and they give it to the dealer. So now the dealer has their car and their money, and then they drive off in another car that does basically the same thing as the car they left there did, plus they left their money. Who would do that? That's what rich people do. They have stuff that works and then they upgrade it. A rich person, you may have heard of this, they'll go into a kitchen, okay? A kitchen that has countertops and a refrigerator and a microwave and an oven, and they'll rip it all out. And they'll replace it with countertops, a refrigerator, a microwave, and an oven. I know, it's crazy. You've heard of this, I know. You're laughing because you can't believe anybody would do that. It's true. Seriously, I know some rich people, and you've probably seen this. They go to the mall, okay? They go to the mall, and they get in a line. Now, rich people hate lines because they want everything right now. But they get in a line. They wait an hour, 2 hours, and they get in a line outside the Apple store, okay? And they stand in this line, and they pull out their iPhones, and they text their friends, I'm in line outside the Apple store to get the new iPhone. It's like, wow, who would do that? All I'm saying is, and it's because when you get richer, if you ever get rich, your desire, your appetite for stuff is going to get bigger and bigger. And see, you're not rich, so you think, no, if I just had a car that worked or a house over, roof over my head, enough. If I just had enough, but no, I'm telling you, when you start having stuff, you want more stuff because that appetite for stuff never goes away. So again, there's side effects for wealth. This is why rich people are weird sometimes and they act funny, and you wonder, whoa, if I ever got rich, I wouldn't be that way. I don't want you to be that way. I hope you all get rich, but we want to be good at it. Now, this letter that the Apostle Paul wrote to Timothy, he goes right to the epicenter, right to the heart of the issue that rich people struggle with. So I want us to look at that today. If you have a Bible, if you brought a Bible, or if you're watching online, you can go to 1 Timothy chapter 6. We're going to begin in verse 17. You can turn in pages. You can thumb there however you get there, or you can just watch, and we'll put it up on the screen. And in this passage of Scripture, he addresses specifically rich people in the church, but just rich people in general. And listen to how he begins as you're finding 1 Timothy 6. This, I'll let you kind of use your imagination with this. If you were writing this, here's what he says. Command those who are rich in this present world. Command is an instruct. Command those who are rich in this present world. Now, what do you think he's going to say? What would you say? You're getting ready to instruct rich people, and you get to tell them, you get to command something. What would you tell rich people? Listen to where the Apostle Paul begins. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant. How did he know? How did he know? You know what he's saying? He's saying if you ever become rich, your inclination will be toward arrogance. You ever met any arrogant rich people? And unfortunately, we help them be arrogant because here's what happens. You're in a circle of people and you're talking, and there's like one rich guy there. Have you ever had this happen? You're like a mere mortal, and then there's like the one rich person. And whatever they say, everybody goes, yeah, you're right. You just agree with them. Why? They're rich. They must be the smartest person in the circle. Because when a person gets rich, they think they get smarter. They think that their IQ goes up with their income. They believe this. I know you're not going to fall for this. Now, here's the deal. You may have gotten rich because you're smart, but getting rich didn't make you smart. But there is a natural inclination to start thinking you're smarter than, and then eventually better than, because you have a lot of wealth. And 2,000 years ago, that was an issue as well. Now, this is so true in our culture that we all kind of have this saying that we say about rich people, okay? And I wrote it down for you. Here's how many times have you said this or heard this? Ready? Or some version of this. He's worth a ton of money, but you'd never know it. Why do we say that? Because generally, when it's a rich person, you know it. They carry it. They wear it. There's something about them. And Paul is saying, look, if you are so lucky or have worked so hard or are so smart or so blessed, regardless of how you think you got there, he says to these Christians, once you cross that imaginary line and suddenly you have more than you need and you have more than most people, don't you let it go to your head. And then, as they're all trying to figure out, well, am I or aren't I? And am I and aren't I? And am I arrogant? He goes even to the heart of that. Look what he says. This is so powerful. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor, because this is what fuels it, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain. Now, this is a big, big, big idea right here. Here's what he's saying. He's saying when you start to have more money, when you get that raise, when you get that promotion, when you get that bonus, when all of a sudden things start looking good, something begins to happen to your hope. And you don't see it happening. You don't see it coming. It's not a decision that you make. But as your wealth or your lifestyle increases, your hope begins to migrate. And your hope begins to migrate toward the accumulation of wealth. And he says, look, warn those rich people, don't let your hope migrate. Don't let your hope move and get attached to and associated with and wrapped all around your finances. That's a terrible thing to let happen. The writer of Proverbs, who's richer than you'll ever be, okay, and wiser than you'll ever be, he was called the wisest man in the world. The writer of Proverbs makes this observation about wealth, and he was a very wealthy man. He said this. He said, the wealth of the rich is their fortified city. I love this. They imagine it because it's not true. They imagine it because it's a pipe dream. They imagine it because it's a vapor. They imagine it because they're deceived. They imagine it a wall too high to scale, or one translation I love says, an unscalable wall. Now, here's what he's saying. He's saying that when you begin to accumulate things and when you become wealthier, as you start moving toward rich, your hope begins to migrate and your hope gets wrapped all around your income. And you begin to think to yourself, you begin to imagine that there is an amount of money that if you could ever accumulate it, if you could ever save it, your walls would be so firm, you would be so extraordinarily safe that you'd be able to protect you, your family, your children, your grandchildren, and if you do your estate planning right, you might even be able to protect your great grandchildren. Now, I want to help you with this because before today, I looked into each of you, even those of you online or watching on television, I looked into each of your personal finances, and I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to give you the answer. I'm going to give you a specific answer because I know what's going on with you. And so here's the question to kind of help you get your head wrapped around the migration of your hope. Here's the question. How much money would you need to secure your future against all imaginable eventualities? In other words, how much money would you need to accumulate so that you could be fearless? You would be golden. Nothing could touch you. Nothing could touch you, your kids, your grandkids, maybe even that next generation, the great-grandkids. You've got enough money amassed and you've got it situated to where you are an unassailable, you are unscalable, you are unreachable, you are untouchable. No matter what happens to the economy, you are safe. How much would you have to save to be safe? And I know the answer to this question for you, but I want you to think about it for just a minute. Then I'm going to give you the answer, okay? Okay, here's the answer. More than you currently have. Always, the answer will be more than you currently have. Here's what happens. Because as you begin to increase in wealth, you think this, and if your hope begins to migrate with your income, here's how you think. But what if? But what if? But what if? Do you know why wealthy people are less generous than poor people? Because poor people never place their hope in their wealth. Why would they do that? Poor people know there's no point in trying to save my way into security. There's no point in trying to save my way into safety. So if you ask a poor person to give you something or to loan you something, they are open-handed. Why? Because they don't live with the myth that somehow if I hold on to my $9.75, somehow I'm going to be able to save my way into safety and save my way into security. But the rich person whose hope has begun to migrate toward their wealth, they deceive themselves. They imagine they have this unscalable wall that somehow they're going to be able to protect themselves from every single eventuality. And I'm just going to tell you, okay, you think there's some magic number out there and once you reach it, you'll be done, but it does not exist. And so as you become more wealthy, your hands begin to close around what you have. And you'll be a terrible rich person. Now, here's what I would imagine. We're going to jump back into the text. Some of you don't consider yourself rich yet, but your heart's already started migrating, hadn't it? It just happens. We don't see it happen. I'm going to give you a test in a minute to help you know where you are, but it just happens. So here's what Paul says. He goes on. He says not to be arrogant, put their hope in wealth. Here we go, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God. Now, here's what's amazing. You know, sometimes people are critical of pastors. Why do preachers always talk about money? Why do preachers always talk about money? I'll tell you why preachers always talk about money. Jesus did. In fact, you read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, he hardly ever mentions heaven or hell, but he talks about money all the time. Do you know why? This is important. Because the chief competitor with your heavenly Father is money. The chief competitor for your heart. It's not Satan and God and which way do I go, which way do I go? I mean, there's a few people, but most of us, it's not, is it Satan or God? I don't know, Is it Halloween or Christmas? I don't know, That's not your struggle. Your hope isn't, okay. He says, Jesus said this, where your heart is, your treasure is. Where your treasure is, your heart is. I want your heart. I want your treasure, because if you give me your treasure, I know your heart will follow. Here's what happens. When your hope begins to migrate, and you'll never make this decision consciously, wealth becomes a substitute for God. Jesus said it this way. He said, you can't serve two masters. I wonder what he's talking about. He says, you'll either serve money or stuff, the word really means, or you'll serve God. That's the tension. The writer of Proverbs, incredible verse that Sandra and I have incorporated into our prayer life and into our devotional life years and years ago. It says, keep falsehood and lies, Proverbs 30, verse 8. Keep falsehood and lies far from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches, but only my daily bread. Otherwise, I might disown you and say, who is the Lord? Who is the Lord? The writer of Proverbs understood there is an amount of wealth that if you're not careful will so differentiate you and separate you from God. You'll say, I used to be a God follower. I used to be a church person. I used to be a Christian, but who is the Lord? And you'll never know that it was your wealth that was a wedge between you and your heavenly Father. And so he says, wealth can become a substitute for God. Now, I want to help you out here. I want to help you kind of get a glimpse of where you are in this. Has your heart started to migrate? So I'm going to give you two statements. And I want you to be honest with yourself, no elbowing, no eye contact, just look straight ahead, And I'm going to give you two statements, and I want you to think for a minute, which one of these creates the greatest anxiety in you? And then I'm going to kind of give you a broader context so you won't feel so guilty, because I don't want anybody to feel guilt. After all, we're in church, okay? So I'm going to give you these two statements, okay? These two statements, and I just want you to ask yourself the question, if suddenly you discovered that either of these statements was absolutely true, which one would create the greatest anxiety in you? Ready? Here we go. Statement number one, there is no God. When you die, lights out, it's over. Never see loved ones again. They'll never see you again. It's over. It's as if you never existed. There's no purpose. There's nothing beyond this life. There is no God. Second statement, you have no money. It's gone. All of it. Can't get it back. You're at zero. which one would create more anxiety? Now, while you're thinking about that and feeling good about yourself, or like, I don't know, let me just put it in a different context. Now imagine that you're in the hospital and you're all hooked up to that stuff that none of us want to be hooked up to. In fact, some of you may have gotten some news this week that makes this illustration very vivid, because before you got the information you got this week from the doctor, you would say, well, I think this would bother me, but all of a sudden now I have a different perspective now that I realize that I may be facing a shorter life. So imagine now that you're in the hospital and you don't have long to live. Now which one of these becomes more important? Here's what will happen. Wherever your hope was before, it now shifts to your concern over this issue. What happens after this life? Is there a God? Where am I going to spend eternity? Will I see my loved ones again? Is there anybody waiting on me? Suddenly in that moment, at that stage when you're facing eternity, if there's an eternity, the issue of God is everything, and suddenly, no one will have to tell you this, the pastor won't have to talk you into it. If you grew up as a theist, or you grew up in church, or you believe in God at all, suddenly 110% of your hope is going to be in God. So here's my question, here's Paul's point, and here's what Jesus said over and over and over. If your hope is going to be in God at the end, why not go ahead and put your hope in God in the middle? If your hope is going to be in God in the end when you have no control over what happens next, why not go ahead and put your hope in God in the middle when you actually have no control over what happens next? He goes on. He says, tell them, put their hope in God. And then he finishes up, who richly provides us with everything for our surprise enjoyment. You can go ahead and get another iPhone. It's fine. You can give all that stuff away and trash your kitchen and trade in your car. But don't you make the mistake of putting your hope in your wealth. In other words, here's what he's saying. This is so powerful. He says, why would you put your hope in the provision when you have the opportunity to put your hope in the provider? Why would you spend a minute, a day, a week? Why would you live your life leaning into amassing a number of dollars that makes you feel as if there's some sort of security, knowing you're never going to get to that number, because whenever you get to the next number, you're still going to have oh yeah, but what if? So let's just put the question up there. Why hope in riches when you can hope in the one who richly provides? It's kind of silly, isn't it? So here's what we're going to do to kind of wrap up this next session on how to be rich. I'm going to have us make a declaration together. Now, you may not believe it, but I'm going to ask you to say it out loud anyway. You've lied before. It's okay if you can lie again, okay? So just lie along with us here, okay? Even if you're not sure, you're not a church person, I just want you to say this, because this is kind of the bottom line. And I'm telling you, this is life-changing. This has nothing to do with whether or not you get rich or stay rich. This has everything to do with how you behave as a rich person. And I want you to be good at this. And as you're going to see in a minute, you're going to want you to be good at this. So I'm going to read it first, and then we're going to read it a couple times together. So here's the statement. I will not place my hope in riches, but in him who richly provides. So let's say it once, and then we're going to practice some. Ready? Now this time when we get to, and those of you at home, you need to play along, okay? Somebody's going to think you're talking to yourself, but that's okay. When we get to the word riches, this time we're going to have a little attitude like, huh? Who would do that? So it's going to sound like this. I will not place my hope in riches. I mean, who would place their hope in riches when you can put your hope in the one who richly provides? Who would put their hope in riches that are uncertain? Who would put their hope in riches when the stock market can fall apart? Who would put their hope in riches when you might get sick and riches won't help anyway? Why would you put your hope in riches when all of a sudden something happens to one of your kids and all the money in the world can't turn their heart back to you or fix your marriage? Why would you put your hope in riches when the things that riches can help really is a pretty small category when you think about what is already most important to you? And in the end, it's not going to matter. So what foolish person and what crazy rich person would ever put their hope in riches, no matter how much riches they have, when you can put your hope in the one who richly provides? So this time when we get to riches, we're going to say, I will not place my hope in riches. Who would do that? But in him. In fact, ladies, you can go, riches? You haven't done that since you were about 14, so this is riches, but in him who richly provides. Okay, you ready? Here we go with a little attitude. Ready? I will not place my hope That wasn't very good. Okay, one more time. All right, that was a little tame. All right, here we go. I will not place my hope. There you go. But in. Okay. See, that's a game changer right there. That's life changing. That'll make you a good rich person. You know what you'll do? God will keep putting stuff in your hand, I hope. You know what you'll never do? You never do this. You never do this. So here's the summary. Don't be arrogant. Don't put your hope in wealth. Put your hope in God, who richly provides. Now, so here's the question. We're all done. Has your hope migrated? So you're not even rich yet. Your hope's already migrating, isn't it? It's like, guys, I got a raise. Like I went from bag boy to, I'm in management, and I'm already like kind of save my way into safety. Ooh. Has your hope already started migrating? Here's just maybe pastoral for just a second. Even if I'm not your pastor, if you just let me kind of lean into your life. See, if you allow your hope to migrate, you will become ungrateful and you will become entitled. You just will. And if you met entitled people, you don't want to be entitled. You'll become ungrateful. And you will become ugly. Okay? Because when a person slowly wraps their fingers around everything and thinking, I got to save it, I got to hold on to this because what if, they become ugly. Because Jesus says that the definition of greed is the assumption that everything placed in my hand is for my consumption. That's the definition of greed. Some of you already make twice as much money as you thought you'd ever make, and you're not enjoying it. Most of you make more money than your parents. You're not enjoying it. You are more stressed out than your parents who never had as much as you, and you wonder, what's wrong with me? And it's because on the inside, your hope has migrated to your wealth, and you can't enjoy it, and you're not happy, and everybody around you is unhappy, and you think, yeah, but if only, and I'm just telling you, one day you're going to come to the end of that, but you won't be able to come back to now. And do it right. And then, worst of all, at the end you're going to be a hypocrite. Because in the end you're going to call for a priest or a pastor, or you're going to pray. You're going to say, God, help me. My hope is in you. And the good news is God is gracious. The bad news is he's not going to let you come back to this day and relive your 30s or your 40s or your 50s. You're not going to get to be a parent of those teenage kids anymore. You're not going to get the first 5 years back of being a grandparent. It's gone. God loves you. God forgives you. But if you spent the good years of your life chasing something you're never going to catch, trying to save your way into safety that doesn't exist, and alienating the people that you say you love the most, and then at the end saying, oh God, my hope is in you. Why would you do that? Why put our hope in riches when we can put our hope in the one who richly provides?
Thanks so much for listening to Your Move. Don't forget to check out BeRichTogether.com. Together, we can help local and global nonprofits go further faster with the people they're already serving in their communities.